We're going to move into the wonderful world of SNMP and all three versions of it for a few minutes here. And the simple network management protocol, it's used to carry network management info from one network device to another, and it's really beyond commonplace. You're going to find it in just about every network out there today. And an S&M deployment has three main parts. You have the manager, which is the device doing the monitoring. You have the agents, which are the devices being monitored and running an SNMP instance. Then you have the management information base, the MIB, and that's the database on the agent that contains important information, or in SNMP speak, variables about that agent. Now, SNMP managers poll agents over UDP 161, and these messages can take the form of gets and sets. And I've seen some confusing explanations of these over the years, so this is about as straightforward as it gets. A get is a request for information, and I've always remembered, like, hey, get me some information. It's a get, tell me something. Then you have a set, which is where the manager says, I would like you to please set this variable to the value I have indicated here. So, a get is a little ruder than a set, but these are the two main forms of communication between manager and agent. Now, I'm sure you already see the problem here, and if you don't, there's a hint in the arrows, because you'll notice those are one-way communications. Manager talking to agent, manager talking to agent. And the problem is, let's say that you have a 10-minute interval set on this polling, and 10 seconds after the most recent polling, some variable changes wildly on the agent. Something happens, an event occurs that the manager really should know about right now. Well, with gets and sets, you don't have that. And then the next time the manager asks, hey, get me some information, it could be, hey, 9 minutes and 50 seconds ago, something really bad happened. And that's not the kind of rapid notification we like in today's networks. So to get such a quick notification on an event without overloading the manager by over polling, because one approach you could take is, well, we'll just poll every 10 seconds. That's probably not good either, because you're putting a huge workload on the manager. The agents have to answer all those pollings, and there could be a little bit of a bandwidth issue in there, but I'd be more worried about the overload on that manager. What we can do instead is configure what we call a trap. Yes, it's a trap, and I'm really bad at it. Do your own. We configure these traps on the managed devices, and it allows the agents to send a message to the manager when such a variable changes. It's like, here's some information that you should have right away. Now, we still have three versions of SNMP out there, versions 1, 2C, and 3. And we know that's fertile ground for exam questions, but also you need to know these differences for your work with production networks, because there are serious security concerns with the earlier versions. Version 3 has both authentication and encryption capabilities. The earlier versions do not. So whenever possible, you should use version 3. The use of other versions should be restricted to allowing read-only access via the use of a community string. I love that. It's a community string. Well, what the heck is a community string? It's a kind of combination of a password and an authority level that are found in the first two versions of SNMP that allow you to set strings as read-only or read-write. And I've got one of these for you on the board. We're not going to walk through this on the live equipment. We are going to do a little bit of version 3 there. But you can see the name is simply SNMP Server Community, or the Commandos. You follow that by the name of the community string that you're creating. Then you've got a couple of options, and the more important ones, in my humble opinion, are RO and RW, which is read-only and read-write. You can type an ACL into it, and then you end up with the command SNMP Server Community CCNP RO 15. And this would allow hosts identified by ACL 15 to have read-only access to any SNMP objects that are specified by this community string. This was fine for a long time, but again, the lack of encryption and authentication, we're not real crazy about that. So thankfully, version 3 came along, and we're going to look at some of this on the board and go through iOS help. And you are going to see some of the most long-winded commands you are ever going to see. Long-winded indeed. I guarantee you we're going to see that magic dollar sign because the commands get so long on this one. So let's go ahead and start first off we're going to create a group, then you create a user, and then you define the location for traps. That's basically the 3 steps we're going to do here. And let's go ahead and dive in with that group command. Let's do that first. No use in creating a user with a group association if the group hasn't been created yet. So SNMP server, you need that little hyphen there. A lot of options here too, but only a few that we really need, and the one we need right now is group. We are doing what is officially known as defining a user security model group. So let's get the heck out of that. And we've got the word group, then you put the name of the group. And here comes the first part that really tests whether you understand which versions have authentication and encryption, because you got to pick one of these groups. And we're told version 1 uses the V1 security model, version 2C uses the 2C security model, and then finally version 3 uses the user security model version 3. Not a lot of detail given here about what those first 2 security models are. We know what they are, so we're going to avoid them, and we're going to choose V3. And here comes the second test of whether you studied or not, right? We have to know what these levels are. And they look really odd. You know, you've got capital letters in the middle, which always makes things look strange. You've got auth no priv, no auth no priv, and auth priv. Okay. Well, if we break those down, though, what we're talking about is authentication and privacy. And the privacy part comes in with encryption. So with these particular groups, what we have is a group that has authentication but no privacy, meaning it has no encryption. You have another group that has nothing. It has no authentication and no privacy. And then finally, we have a group that has both authentication and privacy. So that will be no surprise to you that that's the one we're going to go with. So we need to put priv there. And what else we got? Wow. We can specify an ACL to be associated with this group. Context and match we're not concerned about with, and really these views, I want to talk about these for a minute. We're not going to configure one because writing SNMP views really is far, far, far out of the scope of the NP switch exam. But I do want to tell you a couple things you need to know about these groups: notify, read, and write. If you don't define a read view, all objects can be read. Okay, makes sense. If no write view is defined, no object can be written. And if no notify view is defined, then the members of the group will not be notified of changes, which makes sense too. So watch that read write thing, because again, the read view, if you don't create a read view, everything can be read. If you don't create a write view, nothing can be written. So that's about it for those. Now we're just going to go with that right there, and that creates our group. And you're saying, well, Chris, that wasn't long-winded at all. Stick around. Don't go on any long trips. We got one for you here. Let's see what we've got. SNMP server. And we're going to go with user. And we're going to use SHA for authentication and AES 182-bit. Let's go with 128-bit encryption. We'll see those choices as we go along. And one question that may have come to your mind when we were talking about the security levels, why would you ever choose a lesser security level? You would always choose auth priv unless for some reason the only reason I can think of is that your hardware wouldn't allow it, or you thought you didn't need it. Now some of these choices here with SHA authentication and AES encryption, it's going to be dependent on your hardware whether you can actually run those or not. But that's what we're going to go with here. So let's see what we've got for user. First off, we'll put me in. And group to which the user belongs. We know that's Bulldogs. And now we've got remote, and then we have the 3 security models again. So we're going to stick with V3. Then we have access, auth, and encrypted, whether we're specifying passwords as MD5 or SHA. So tell you what, let's go with auth here. And the choices are MD5 and SHA, and all things being equal, if your hardware can handle it, it's not even a choice. You're going to go with SHA here. Then we've got the authentication password for user. Notice they misspelled password. So let's see, we'll go with CCNP for that password. Then we've got our access and priv levels, and we're going to go with priv for encryption parameters for this user, because that's where AES and 3DES and DES are hiding. So we'll use AES. And then finally, how many bits do you want with that, Mr.? Well, I'll take 128. And we have to continue because now I've got to enter a privacy password, 1S, for user. And even I at this point am tired of typing, so I will put that in for my privacy password. And then I could still associate an ACL with this group, but I am going to just leave it right there and also get rid of that null space. Watch that at the end. And in case you've never seen this odd prompt before, when you get a $sign here, that just means that your command is too long to be displayed on the line in full. If you wanted to start it at the beginning, see it from the beginning, you could just go Control A, and that will move your cursor to the front and also move the command to the front. So that is it for that command. Now we need to define the location for traps, and you'll notice it mentioned configuring SNMP version 3 USM user, persisting, etc., and then please wait, and then we're done. So far so good. Now you just simply have to define the location for traps. Or is it that simple? Let's use the command. And this time we want host. Specify host to receive SNMP notifications. And then we're going to put 10113 in for this one. And we're asked for a couple things, but what we want is to send trap messages to this user. Then you've got to define your your version for notification messages. And here are those choices again, 1, 2C, and 3. We'll go with 3. Then I'm asked for the privilege level again, or the security level, I should say. And I'll stick with priv. And then finally, who is the user? And that's going to be me. And as you see, again, unbelievably, I know you're saying, how many options does this thing have? A lot. But we're going to go just with that. Let's get rid of that null space. And we're done. And that's really, that's a basic walkthrough through SNMP version 3. Gives you a taste of what's going on, especially with those security models. I would know that stuff by heart. As you can see from all the choices, we literally could spend hours with SNMP. But personally, for this exam, I would stick with the versions, knowing how to create a group and a user and setting up authentication in version 3. And that will do it. So that concludes our look at SNMP. Next up, we're going to take a look at something called SLA, and that's going to be on the lab and on the board on the very next video. See you there.